This is a book review of Adam Grant's Hidden Potential. Hidden Potential is about growth mindset. It's about personal development. He makes the point early on that it is very important not to judge where people are, but to look at how far they've come. He considers it a big mistake to look at exam results, aptitude tests, snapshots of how people do at one given point at a particular time, but not look at how much progress they've made. In his view, it's much better to look at how far they've come, considering the context, the childhood experiences, the adversity that they possibly had to endure, and the obstacles that they needed to overcome. Many people have very different circumstances. People have to grow up in all sorts of adversity, in homes where it's not guaranteed that they're going to get a hot meal each and every night, where there's no secure income, where there's lots of stress, anxiety, where the home is not conducive to learning. They don't have a quiet space where they can sit down and study and concentrate for long periods of time. And if the parents and the family are constantly worried about simply being able to eat, or that the house maybe is too cold, or that they might have to move, or that the neighbourhood is very rough, lots of crime, lots of problems. If a person grows up in those circumstances and gets the same results as an individual who had much better circumstances, i.e. nice warm home, private tuition, textbooks, lots of books in the home, secure internet connection to receive information, knowledge, education, the achievements of person A are much better because they have come much further than person B. And so he, in this book, Adam Grant, tries to get the reader to look at ways of how we can take into consideration the context as a much better judge of potential progress in the future. So an indication of where somebody has come from in the past is a better indication of how far they can possibly go than simply just taking an exam at one given point and using that to project and forecast future potential. He talks about a number of different ways how we can constantly improve our ability to learn. And this is not always going to be enjoyable. One thing he advocates is going outside one's comfort zone. Trying new things, trying new experiences, trying to figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are, and not being afraid of making mistakes. He indicates in the book that perfectionists can often do very well in school when the domain is very fixed, like little squares on a chessboard, where there's discrete, fixed knowledge that someone needs to memorize, know, and write down in an exam. But perfectionists don't always do well in the real world, because the real world is not like school. Much more chaos, much more complexity. Many different things can go wrong. Novel situations that have never been encountered before. So the world of school and taking exams is different from the real world, because the real world's challenges, problems are often new, and one has to have the thinking skills, the method, the approach, the way of going about solving a problem. Those skills are going to be essential to solve new problems. And perfectionists can often struggle with this because if they are trying to get better at something, they will often reject what might be a 10% improvement simply because it's not perfect. And he gives the example of him as a young boy, as a diver, and he used to practice his diving, and he would focus too much on getting it 100% correct. And if it wasn't 100% correct, he would keep on doing it, one particular aspect. There's maybe 100 different aspects that need to be improved as a diver. And he would focus on just one at the detriment to him making incremental changes over time. So one of the things that gets in the way of improvement, of 10% improvement, possibly even 1% improvements every day, is the perfectionist tendency, which is to regard mistakes, problems, inaccuracies as, so we end up rejecting everything and almost giving up. Instead, he says that we should invite challenges, problems, failure, because when we fail at something, there's a great opportunity to learn. It's a great data point. When we fail, or when we're inaccurate, or when we get a low score, that's an opportunity to diagnose what went wrong and to get feedback on how to become more accurate over time. And unless you're making mistakes, unless you're failing, not huge failures, obviously, there is a point at which failing and making big mistakes, irreversible mistakes, are not to the individual's benefit in the long term. But making little mistakes every day is an essential part of the learning process. He also talks about how optimally our work should be like a game, should encounter play. So rather than, if I go to the analogy of playing the piano, the way it is sometimes traditionally taught, running up and down scales all day, C major, D major, E major, F major, and arpeggios and broken chords, can be quite boring. And there's a tendency, if you make something boring and repetitive and unimaginative and uncreative, that you will simply burn out, or you will give up because you're so bored and it becomes tedious. But he says that the Goldilocks zone, the optimal zone, the flow state, is achieved when you're practicing in a fun way. You're having fun, you're having enjoyment. It's like a game and you're finding new ways. So going back to the piano, one way I used to practice was to practice with a drum beat. Try different drum beats, and then you can practice broken chords, different left-hand patterns, accompaniment patterns, and time goes by much more quickly when you're engaged in something that's fun and interesting and an opportunity for you to engage with on a more personal level, because you're taking ownership of something when you personalize it, and it becomes more enjoyable rather than imposing a huge degree of self-control over yourself, where over time it's not sustainable to play like a robot, to play like a machine. And so many other different types of activity are like this. It's essential to enjoy what you do. You're only going to get really, really good at something if you enjoy it, if it sparks innate desire to constantly improve and get better at whatever it is, because everyone has different talents, different interests. What's enjoyable to you is not going to be enjoyable for someone else. But to find ways of making what you're doing new, trying different ways of completing a task. He talks about how there was a chess competition. I think it was junior high national chess competition, and there was a particular group who competed called the Raging Rooks, and they challenged a lot of prejudice that was around in the early 1990s. This group came from and inner city, rough neighbourhoods. And because they had a leader who incorporated many of these strategies, learning chess in a fun and unique way, teaching it backwards, so teaching how to trap the opponent's king and then working backwards, having mini competitions, having a mindset that constantly wanted to improve, they actually surpassed all expectations and actually won against private schools in very affluent areas. And this book is full of stories about individuals who have gone on a journey of self-improvement, who have thoughts outside the box, who have not let their initial conditions define their future trajectory and their future pathway and where they will end up. The book is quite inspiring for that reason. Lots of wonderful stories about people who have defied gravity, who have defied expectations, and constantly got feedback, implemented it, and got very good at what they do over a long period of time. And that's what this book is essentially about. Covers quite a broad range of different aspects of human psychology. I would give this book a 7 out of 10. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much.